The ultrasound wand pressed cold against my abdomen, and I watched Dr. Patel's face shift from professional calm to something darker. Her eyes flickered to the screen, then to me, then back again. That 3-second loop told me everything before her mouth even opened. "Vanessa," she said carefully, removing the wand and setting it aside with deliberate slowness. "I need you to stay very calm for me. I'd been getting routine checkups since the bleeding started 3 weeks ago. Nothing dramatic, just spotting that wouldn't stop. My fiancé Christopher had rolled his eyes when I mentioned it, suggested I was being paranoid again. That word. Again. As if my concerns about my own body were a personality flaw he had to endure. "What is it?" My voice came out steadier than I felt. "Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you." Dr. Patel pulled up a stool, her hands folded in her lap. 20 years of practicing medicine had taught her how to deliver bad news, but I could see this one troubled her more than usual. "You have pelvic inflammatory disease. Advanced stage. The scarring suggests it's been progressing for quite some time. At least 18 months. Possibly longer." The fluorescent lights hummed above us. Somewhere down the hall, a baby cried. "I don't understand. How?" "PID is almost always caused by untreated sexually transmitted infections." She paused, choosing her words like stepping stones across dangerous water. "Specifically, in your case, both chlamydia and gonorrhea. The infections have been active long enough to cause severe damage to your fallopian tubes." The room tilted slightly. I gripped the examination table's edge. "That's impossible. I've only been with Christopher for 3 years. We got tested before we—" The memory surfaced like a drowned thing. Christopher insisting we didn't need to wait for results, that the tests were just a formality, that I was overthinking things as usual. Dr. Patel's silence was its own answer. "The scarring," I whispered. "What does that mean?" "I'm so sorry, Vanessa. The damage is extensive. Your chances of conceiving naturally are less than 5%. Even with IVF, the success rate would be significantly compromised." I was 28 years old. Christopher and I had been planning our wedding for next September. His mother had already bought her mother of the groom dress. We'd picked out names for our future children, Eleanor for a girl, Theodore for a boy. Old-fashioned names that Christopher said would sound distinguished when they inevitably followed in his footsteps at Princeton. "I need you to understand something," Dr. Patel continued, and her voice had shifted into something harder, more urgent. "Your partner needs to be tested and treated immediately. And Vanessa, these infections don't appear out of nowhere. Someone transmitted them. The implications hung in the sterile air between us. We also need to run additional tests. When STIs go untreated this long, there can be other complications." She was already filling out lab orders, her pen moving with practiced efficiency. "I'm testing you for HIV, hepatitis, syphilis. Standard protocol." HIV. The word detonated in my chest. "I'm also prescribing you a course of antibiotics." "But the damage that's already been done." She trailed off, then met my eyes directly. "I have to ask, has your partner ever shown symptoms? Discharge? Burning during urination? Any genital sores?" I thought back over 3 years of intimacy. Christopher's insistence on showering immediately after sex, his preference for darkness, the way he'd snap at me if I tried to initiate anything in the morning when natural light filled our bedroom. I'd internalized it all as preferences, quirks, his right to boundaries. "He's very private," I heard myself say, and hated how small my voice sounded. Dr. Patel's expression told me she'd heard that line before, probably hundreds of times. "Vanessa, I need to be direct with you. Based on the progression of the disease, you were infected relatively early in your relationship. If your partner was symptomatic and didn't tell you, didn't seek treatment, and continued to engage in sexual activity with you, knowing he could transmit these infections." She stopped herself, professional boundaries pulling her back from the edge. "I'm a doctor, not a lawyer, but I would document everything. Every date, every symptom, every conversation." I sat there in my paper gown, feet dangling above the cold floor, and felt my entire future rearrange itself like cards being reshuffled by an invisible hand. "There's one more thing," Dr. Patel said quietly. "The reason I brought up documentation. Cases like yours, where there's significant damage and evidence of deliberate negligence. Some of my patients have pursued legal action. I'm not suggesting anything, but I want you to know that this isn't just a medical issue. What happened to you, what was done to you, has consequences. Before we begin, I want to take a moment to thank each of you for being part of this incredible journey. If you're enjoying these stories of empowerment, consider subscribing. It's completely free and helps us build this amazing community. Let's dive in." I drove home in a fog, Dr. Patel's lab orders burning in my purse like evidence at a crime scene. The antibiotics prescription sat beside them. 4 weeks of doxycycline. 4 weeks to kill infections that had already stolen my fertility. Our apartment was empty when I arrived. Christopher taught advanced chemistry at Riverside Preparatory, the prestigious private school where his family name opened doors before his credentials ever could. Tuesdays he had lab until 6, then department drinks that usually stretched until 8 or 9. I had the place to myself for hours. I stood in our bathroom, staring at the space we shared. His expensive cologne bottles lined up with military precision. His electric razor plugged in and ready. The shower he always took immediately after sex, claiming he couldn't sleep, feeling sticky. Methodically, I began searching. The medicine cabinet revealed nothing interesting. Allergy medication? Ibuprofen. The teeth whitening strips he used religiously. I moved to the drawers beneath the sink. Spare toilet paper, cleaning supplies, a box of condoms we never used anymore since I'd gotten my IUD. The IUD. God. That's why the infections had gotten so bad without me noticing typical symptoms. The device had masked some warning signs while the diseases ravaged my reproductive system. I checked the bedroom next, feeling like an intruder in my own home. Christopher's nightstand was always off limits. "Everyone needs some private space," he'd said early in our relationship. And I'd agreed because it seemed reasonable, mature, the kind of boundary healthy couples maintained. I opened it anyway. The first thing I found was unremarkable old phone chargers, a book on teaching pedagogy, some loose change. But tucked beneath a stack of school papers was a prescription bottle. I pulled it out, hands shaking. Azithromycin. Prescribed to Christopher Hendricks 18 months ago by a Dr. Morrison at the East Side Walk-In Clinic. A clinic across town from our regular doctor. A clinic I'd never heard him mention. Azithromycin. I Googled it on my phone. Commonly prescribed for bacterial infections, including chlamydia, gonorrhea. The bottle was empty. He'd taken the full course. 18 months ago. The timeline crashed over me like a wave right around the time I'd started having those weird pains during sex that he'd dismissed as me being too tense. I kept searching, driven by something beyond rational thought now. In the back of his closet, behind shoeboxes, and a gym bag he never used, I found another prescription bottle. This one dated 2 years ago. Doxycycline. Also empty. He'd known. He'd known and gotten himself treated and never said a word. My phone rang. Christopher's photo flashed on the screen, a picture from our vacation to Napa last year. Him in sunglasses grinning at the camera. My arms wrapped around him from behind. I looked so happy, so stupidly, blindly happy. I answered. "Hey babe." His voice came through warm and familiar. "Running a bit late. Daniels wants to grab dinner to discuss the curriculum review. I'll probably be home around 10. Did you have your doctor's appointment?" The casualness of that last question, as if he were asking about a haircut. "Yes," I said, surprised by how normal I sounded. "Everything's fine. Just a routine checkup." Good, good. I told you there was nothing to worry about. You stress yourself out over nothing." He paused, and I could hear restaurant noise in the background, the clink of glasses and low murmur of conversation. "Listen, I know we've had this argument before, but maybe you should consider talking to someone about the anxiety. My mom mentioned her therapist." "Your mom and I should talk," I interrupted, my voice still eerily calm. "Actually, I think we should have dinner with your whole family this weekend." Silence on the other end. Then, "That's random." "Why?" Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, like this video, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Because we're getting married in less than a year, and I barely know them? Don't you think it's time I spent more quality time with my future in-laws? Another pause. I mean, sure. Yeah. That's actually really thoughtful of you. I'll text my mom. He sounded pleased, unsuspecting. See? This is why you're going to be such a great wife. Always thinking about family. After we hung up, I sat on our bed with his empty prescription bottles and thought about the word he'd used to describe me to his colleagues, the one that had gotten back to me through the grapevine. Frigid. He'd called me frigid at the staff holiday party last December, laughing with the other male teachers about how I never wanted to do anything adventurous in bed. The irony was corrosive. I'd stopped initiating sex because it hurt. It hurt because he'd given me diseases and never bothered to warn me, let alone treat me. And then he'd turned my pain into a joke, a character flaw, a sexual inadequacy. I pulled up my phone and started a new note. Documentation, Dr. Patel had said. I began typing. Timeline. Started dating Christopher. September 2021. First time having sex. October 2021. He rushed getting tested. Insisted we didn't need to wait for results. First unusual pain during sex. March 2023. He said I was too tense. Needed to relax more. Prescription bottle has shown found. Doxycycline. Dated May 2023. Prescription bottle #2 found. Azithromycin. Dated August 2024. I photographed both prescription bottles from every angle, making sure the dates and dosages were clearly visible. Then I photographed the lab orders Dr. Patel had given me. The diagnosis written in her careful handwriting. Pelvic inflammatory disease secondary to untreated chlamydia and gonorrhea. Significant bilateral tubal scarring. The apartment felt different now, like a stage set I was seeing from backstage. Everything familiar had become evidence. Our bed where he'd infected me. The shower where he'd washed away the evidence. The kitchen where he'd made me coffee in the mornings and kissed my forehead and called me paranoid for worrying about my own body's warning signs. I opened my laptop and started researching. Not lawyers, not yet. Something else first. PID support groups. Infertility forums. Survivors of reproductive coercion. The internet opened up like a dark flower, revealing thousands of women who'd lived variations of my story. Women who'd been infected and lied to and damaged and then blamed for the consequences. One thread caught my eye. He called me crazy for suspecting. Doctors confirmed I was right. Another. Lost my fertility to his lies. He's engaged to someone new now. Should I warn her? And another. His family still doesn't know what he did. They think I'm the reason we broke up. That last one lodged in my chest like a splinter. His family. The Hendricks clan with their old money and older traditions. Christopher's mother, Patricia, who'd never quite warmed to me, who'd made subtle comments about my modest upbringing and state school education. His father, Richard, stern and distant, a retired federal judge who valued reputation above all else. His younger sister, Chelsea, who'd been cool but polite at family gatherings, clearly taking her cues from their mother. They were gathering next Sunday for Patricia's birthday. Christopher had mentioned it weeks ago. A formal dinner at their estate in Greenwich. I'd been dreading it, another evening of feeling scrutinized and found wanting. But now I had a different plan forming. I pulled out my phone and texted Christopher's mother directly. Patricia, I know Christopher mentioned Sunday dinner for your birthday. I'd love to help with preparations. Could I come early to assist? Would mean so much to spend time with you before the wedding. Vanessa. The reply came surprisingly fast. How thoughtful. Yes, come at 3. We'll have tea first. P. 3 hours before dinner. 3 hours to sit with Patricia Hendricks, woman to woman, and show her exactly who her son was. I spent the rest of the evening preparing. I made copies of everything. The prescription bottles, the lab orders, Dr. Patel's diagnosis, my medical records from the past 3 years, showing the progression of symptoms that Christopher had dismissed as anxiety and stress. I created a folder labeled simply Evidence and backed it up to 3 different cloud services. Then I did something that surprised even myself. I made an appointment with a lawyer for Thursday. Not to sue, not yet, but to understand my options. To know what was legally actionable versus what was merely morally bankrupt. When Christopher came home at 10:30, smelling of beer and expensive cologne, I was in bed with a book, the picture of domestic tranquility. "Hey babe." He leaned down to kiss my forehead, and I let him, cataloging the moment for future reference. "Sorry I'm late. Daniels can talk forever. It's fine. How was dinner?" "Good, good. We might actually get the budget approved for new lab equipment." He started his nightly routine watch-off. Wallet on the dresser, shoes in the closet. "Oh," my mom texted. "She's thrilled you're coming early on Sunday. Fair warning though, she's going to put you to work. You know how she gets about her parties." "I don't mind. I want her to like me." Christopher smiled, loosening his tie. "She likes you. She's just particular. Give it time." Time. As if time would fix anything. As if enough time could heal fallopian tubes scarred beyond repair. "I'm going to shower," he announced, already heading to the bathroom. Of course he was, while the water ran. I stared at the ceiling and thought about Sunday. Patricia's birthday dinner. The whole family gathered. The perfect moment. I wasn't planning to sue Christopher in court. That would take years, cost money I'd have to fight for, and ultimately might lead nowhere. Men had gotten away with worse. No, I had something else in mind. Something more immediate, more devastating. I was going to destroy him the way he'd destroyed me from the inside out, in front of the people whose opinions he valued most. I was going to take the pristine reputation of Christopher Hendricks, golden boy of the Hendricks family, respected educator, beloved son, and I was going to burn it down with nothing but the truth. Let them call me Frigid then. Let them call me crazy. I'd show them the medical records that proved otherwise. The lawyer I met with on Thursday was a woman named Diane Fletcher. Her office occupied the top floor of a building downtown, all glass walls and modern art. She listened to my story without interrupting, making occasional notes on a legal pad. When I finished, she sat back in her chair and studied me with sharp brown eyes. "What do you want?" she asked bluntly. "Revenge? Justice? Compensation? Those are three different things." "I want him to face consequences," I said. "Real ones. Legally, you have a case. Knowingly transmitting an STI, especially one that causes permanent damage, opens him up to civil liability. Some states even have criminal statutes. We could pursue damages for medical expenses, pain and suffering, loss of consortium, future fertility treatments." She tapped her pen against the pad. "But lawsuits are public record. Are you prepared for that?" I thought about it. A court case would mean depositions, testimonies, my medical history laid bare. It would mean lawyers picking apart my sex life, questioning my choices, suggesting I should have known somehow. "What else?" I asked. Diane smiled slightly. "You document everything. You create an ironclad record, and you make sure the right people see it. His employer, for instance. Moral turpitude clauses are standard in teaching contracts. If Riverside Prep finds out he knowingly transmitted STIs to his partner, infected her, never disclosed or sought treatment for her, that's grounds for termination. His family," I added. "They should know too." "That's trickier. What you tell people privately is your business. But be careful about written statements. Stick to facts. Show evidence. Let the truth speak for itself." She leaned forward. "Vanessa, I have to ask. Are you sure about this path? Once you start, there's no taking it back. His reputation will be destroyed. Your relationship obviously will end. This will get ugly." "My fertility is already destroyed," I said quietly. The relationship was already over the moment he infected me, and said nothing. "I'm just the last one to find out." Deanne nodded slowly. "Then let's make sure you're protected. I'll draft a demand letter and send it to him after you've done whatever you're planning for Sunday. That way, there's a legal record that you attempted notification and settlement before any public disclosure. It covers you against defamation claims. Truth is an absolute defense, but documentation helps." I left her office with a plan. Sunday afternoon, I'd show Patricia the evidence. Sunday evening at dinner, I'd tell the whole family. Monday morning, Deanne would send the demand letter. By Monday afternoon, I'd be contacting Riverside Prep's administration with the same documentation. Christopher wouldn't see it coming. Why would he? In his mind, I was the anxious, frigid girlfriend who couldn't keep up with his needs. The girl from the wrong side of town who should be grateful he'd chosen her. The woman who stressed about nothing and needed therapy for her baseless worries. He had no idea I'd found his hidden prescriptions. No idea I'd been diagnosed. No idea I'd spent the last 3 days building a case against him with the methodical precision of someone who had absolutely nothing left to lose. Saturday morning. I woke up to Christopher kissing my shoulder. "Morning, beautiful," he murmured, his hand sliding across my hip. I went still. After everything I knew, the thought of him touching me made my skin crawl. But I couldn't show it. Not yet. "I'm not feeling well," I said, which wasn't a lie. I felt sick constantly now. Whether from the infections or the antibiotics or the sheer betrayal, I couldn't tell. He sighed and rolled away. "You're always not feeling well lately." The accusation in his tone was familiar. This was how it always went, my legitimate health concerns reframed as inconvenience, manipulation, attention-seeking. "Maybe that's because I'm actually sick," I said, testing the waters. "Or maybe you're just anxious again." "Seriously, Vanessa. You should make an appointment with someone. This is getting out of hand." I turned to look at him. He was checking his phone. Already losing interest in the conversation, his profile in the morning light looked like a stranger's. "When was the last time you got tested?" I asked suddenly. His thumb froze mid-scroll. "What?" "For STIs. When did you last get tested?" A muscle in his jaw twitched. "Why are you asking me this?" "Because I'm getting my results back next week." Just routine. But I realized. I don't know when you last checked. We should both stay on top of it. Right? The silence stretched for 3 long seconds. Then he laughed, but it sounded forced. "You're being paranoid again. We've been together for 3 years. Monogamous. There's no reason to. So you haven't been tested since we got together." "Vanessa." He set his phone down and looked at me with exasperation. "What is this really about? Are you accusing me of something?" The gaslighting was so smooth, so practiced. "Make me the problem. Make me the crazy one." "Just asking a question," I said mildly. "Well, it's an insulting question. After 3 years together, you should trust me by now." He got out of bed, yanking on his running clothes, with sharp movements. "I'm going for a run. Maybe you should use this time to think about whether you actually want to marry me. Because if you don't trust me..." He left the sentence hanging like a threat as he walked out. I lay in bed listening to the front door slam and thought about how many times he'd done this, turned my legitimate concerns into attacks on him, flipped the script until I was apologizing for bringing things up. It had worked for 3 years. It wouldn't work anymore. I spent Saturday preparing my evidence presentation. I bought a simple black folder and arranged everything chronologically, the timeline I'd created. Photos of the prescription bottles, my medical records, Dr. Patel's diagnosis, the lab orders for additional STI testing. I printed everything in duplicate, 1 set for Patricia, 1 set for me. That evening, Christopher apologized for snapping at me, exactly as I knew he would. The cycle was predictable: create conflict, leave to punish me with absence, return contrite, accept my grateful forgiveness, reset. "I'm sorry, babe," he said, bringing home Thai food from my favorite place. "You're right to want us both to stay healthy. I'll make an appointment next week, okay?" Too late, I thought. About 18 months too late. "Thank you," I said instead, accepting his kiss, playing the part one final time. Sunday morning dawned clear and cold. I dressed carefully for tea with Patricia, a conservative navy dress, pearl earrings, my hair pulled back. I looked like the kind of woman who belonged in the Hendricks family, polished, appropriate, trustworthy. The black folder sat in my purse like a loaded weapon. Christopher was getting ready for the evening portion, still hours away. "You don't have to stress about impressing my mom," he said, adjusting his collar in the mirror. "Just be yourself." Be myself. The irony was exquisite. "I want her to know who I really am," I said honestly. The Hendricks estate sat on 3 acres in Greenwich, all colonial architecture and manicured gardens. I pulled up the circular driveway at exactly 3 o'clock. my heart hammering against my ribs. Patricia answered the door herself, dressed in cream-colored silk, her silver hair perfectly coiffed. "Vanessa, how punctual. Come in." The foyer was all marble and oil paintings, family history displayed like museum pieces. I followed her to a sunroom overlooking the gardens, where tea had been set up on a white wicker table. "Earl Grey or chamomile?" Patricia asked, playing hostess. "Earl Grey, please." We made small talk for 10 minutes, the weather, the upcoming wedding, her birthday plans. Patricia was polite but distant, maintaining the slight chill she'd always shown me. I was not her choice for Christopher, I'd always known that. But I was about to become her only source of truth about who her son really was. "Patricia," I said, setting down my teacup with steady hands. "I came early because there's something I need to show you. Something about Christopher." Her expression froze into Patrician ice. "I'm not interested in petty relationship drama, Vanessa. If you're having cold feet about the wedding—" "I was diagnosed with pelvic inflammatory disease on Tuesday," I interrupted. "Advanced stage. The infections that caused it, chlamydia and gonorrhea, went untreated for so long that I'm now infertile. My chances of ever having children are less than 5%. Patricia's teacup rattled slightly against its saucer. "I found prescription bottles in Christopher's belongings. He was treated for the same infections 18 months ago, and never told me. Never warned me. Never made sure I got treatment. He let the diseases destroy my fertility, while he saved his own." I pulled out the black folder and slid it across the table. "These are my medical records, the diagnosis from my doctor. Photos of his prescription bottles with the dates. Everything is documented." Patricia's face had gone pale. She opened the folder with trembling hands and began reading. I watched emotions flicker across her features. Disbelief, horror, denial, and finally, something that looked like devastation. "He called me Frigid," I continued quietly. "At his work holiday party. Told his colleagues I was sexually inadequate. But the reason I stopped wanting to have sex was because it hurt. It hurt because he'd infected me with diseases he knew he had. He damaged me, then blamed me for the consequences, then turned me into a joke." Patricia was staring at the medical records, at the clear diagnosis in Dr. Patel's handwriting, at the photos of prescription bottles with her son's name on them. "Tomorrow my lawyer is sending him a demand letter," I said. "I'm also contacting Riverside Prep's administration with this same documentation. Moral turpitude clauses typically cover knowingly transmitting diseases. He'll likely lose his job." "You're trying to destroy him," Patricia whispered. "No," I said. "I'm making sure people know what he did. There's a difference. He destroyed me. I'm just refusing to stay silent about it." Patricia closed the folder and sat very still. When she finally looked at me, her eyes were wet. "Why are you showing me this before telling the family?" "Because you're his mother. You raised him. I thought you deserved to know first, to decide how you want to handle it." I paused. "And because I wanted you to understand that every time you thought I wasn't good enough for your family, I was already damaged by your son. Every time you looked at me like I was beneath you, I was dying slowly from something he gave me. The cruelty of that landed exactly as I intended." "What do you want from me?" Patricia asked, her voice barely audible. "I want you to hear the truth before dinner tonight. I want you to look at these documents and know that I'm not lying, not exaggerating, not being dramatic. And then I want you to sit at that birthday dinner table and watch me tell everyone else." I stood up, leaving the folder with her. "That's your copy. I have another." I walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back. "One more thing," I said. "When he gets here tonight and you look at him, remember that he let me believe I was crazy, that I was frigid, that I needed therapy. He let me think there was something wrong with me while he knew exactly what he'd done. That's who your son is." I left Patricia sitting in the sunroom with the truth spread out before her like shrapnel. The next 4 hours were the longest of my life. I drove to a coffee shop and tried to steady my nerves. My phone stayed silent. Patricia didn't call, didn't text. I didn't know if she was processing, planning, or destroying the evidence to protect her son. At 7 o'clock, I returned to the estate. Cars filled the driveway now. Christopher's black Audi, Richard's Mercedes, Chelsea's Range Rover. The family had gathered. Christopher texted, "Where are you?" "Dinner's starting soon," I replied. Just arrived. Be right there. I sat in my car for one more minute, checking my reflection in the mirror. Same navy dress. Same pearl earrings. Same polished exterior. But underneath, I was a woman who'd lost her future and decided the truth was worth more than politeness. I grabbed my purse with the second folder of evidence and walked toward the house. Through the dining room windows, I could see them all gathered around Patricia's perfectly set table. Crystal. China. Candles. The portrait of civilization. I was about to detonate a bomb in the middle of it. And God help me, I couldn't wait. I walked through the front door like I was crossing a battlefield threshold. The Hendricks family was already seated in the formal dining room. Christopher at his father's right hand. Chelsea across from him checking her phone. Richard at the head of the table looking impatient. And Patricia at the opposite end, her face carefully blank. The black folder nowhere in sight. Our eyes met. Hers flickered with something. Warning? Permission? I couldn't tell. There she is, Christopher said, standing to pull out my chair beside him. We were starting to worry. Sorry, I said smoothly, settling into my seat. Traffic. Richard grunted acknowledgement and reached for the wine. Let's eat. Patricia's been fussing over this meal all day. A uniformed server appeared with the first course, some kind of soup that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. I picked up my spoon mechanically, aware of Patricia's gaze on me from across the table. So Vanessa, Chelsea said, breaking the silence with forced brightness. Chris tells me you're still job hunting? Anything promising? The condescension was subtle but unmistakable. This was how they saw me, the girl who couldn't quite measure up, who needed their charity in the form of Christopher's affection. Actually, I said, I've been dealing with some health issues. It's been taking up most of my time. Christopher's hand found my knee under the table, squeezing in what was probably meant to be comfort but felt like a warning. Nothing serious, he interjected. Just some stress-related stuff, right, babe? I looked at him. Really looked at him. The man I'd planned to marry? Who'd given me diseases and watched me suffer and called me frigid for recoiling from the pain he'd caused. No, I said quietly. It's actually very serious. The table went still. Vanessa, Christopher started. I was diagnosed with pelvic inflammatory disease on Tuesday. I continued, my voice steady. It's caused by sexually transmitted infections, specifically chlamydia and gonorrhea that went untreated for so long that I'm now infertile. Chelsea's soup spoon clattered against her bowl. Richard's hand froze halfway to his wine glass. What the hell are you talking about? Christopher's face had gone pale. I pulled the second folder from my purse and set it on the table. These are my medical records. Complete diagnosis from my doctor, including lab results confirming the infections. The damage is permanent. I have less than a 5% chance of ever conceiving naturally. This is inappropriate, Richard said sharply. This is a family dinner, not— Let her speak. Patricia's voice cut through the room like a blade. All eyes turned to her. She sat perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap, but her expression was carved from ice. I want to hear what Vanessa has to say. Christopher looked between his mother and me, confusion giving way to the first flickers of panic. Mom. She's clearly having some kind of episode. I found your prescription bottles, I said, turning to face him directly. Azithromycin, from 18 months ago. Doxycycline from 2 years ago. Both prescribed at the East Side walk-in clinic. Both for treating sexually transmitted infections. You knew you had these diseases. You got yourself treated. And you never told me. The color drained completely from Christopher's face. That's not— I don't know what you're talking about. There are photos in the folder. Your name on the bottles, the dates, everything. Chelsea grabbed the folder, flipping it open. Her face changed as she scanned the contents: medical records, prescription photos, the timeline I'd documented. Oh my God, she whispered. Chris, what did you do? This is insane. Christopher pushed back from the table, standing. You're going through my personal belongings now? Making up accusations? I'm not making anything up. I stood too, facing him across the remains of Patricia's birthday dinner. You infected me. You got yourself treated in secret. You let those infections destroy my reproductive system while telling me I was anxious, paranoid, too tense. You called me frigid at your work party while I was dying inside from diseases you gave me. You don't know where those infections came from. He shot back. And I could see him grasping for any lifeline. You can't prove. The timeline proves it. My voice had gone cold. I was a virgin when we met. You're the only person I've ever been with. The infections showed up in my system within months of us having sex for the first time, right around the time you first got treated. The progression matches perfectly. Richard was reading through the folder now, his face growing darker with each page. Is this true? He asked his son. Did you know you had these infections? Christopher's mouth opened and closed. It was a false positive. The clinic made a mistake. A false positive that you took medication for? I pulled out my phone, pulling up the photos I'd saved. 2 separate prescriptions, 2 different antibiotics, both specifically for treating STIs. That's not a false positive. That's you getting treated while I got sicker. Why wouldn't you tell her? Chelsea asked, her voice breaking. If you actually cared about her, why wouldn't you? Because he didn't care, I said flatly. Because telling me would mean admitting he'd either cheated on me or had infections before we met and lied about being tested. Either way, it made him look bad. So instead, he let me suffer. He let my body be destroyed. And when I started showing symptoms, he convinced me it was all in my head. Patricia had been silent through all of this, but now she spoke. The medications, Christopher. Explain the medications. Christopher's jaw worked. I could see him trying to formulate a lie, a story, anything that would explain away the evidence. But there was no good explanation. The truth was written in prescription labels and medical records. It was complicated, he finally said. I didn't know how to tell you. I was scared you'd leave. So you said nothing? I asked. You let me think I was crazy? You humiliated me to your colleagues. Called me frigid. Suggested I needed therapy, all while knowing you'd destroyed me from the inside out. That's not fair. Fair? The word exploded out of me. You want to talk about fair? I can't have children, Christopher. We picked out names Eleanor and Theodore. Remember? You talked about them following in your footsteps to Princeton. You let me plan a future that you knew I'd never have because you couldn't be bothered to tell me the truth. Tears were streaming down my face now, hot and angry. I spent 3 years thinking something was wrong with me, that I wasn't enough, that I was broken somehow. And all along, it was you. You broke me, you infected me, and you watched me fall apart, and you did nothing. The room was dead silent, except for my ragged breathing. Richard set down the folder with deliberate care. Get out, he said to Christopher. Dad, get out of this house. Richard's voice boomed through the dining room. You are a disgrace. To this family. To your profession. To basic human decency. You're overreacting, Christopher tried. It was a mistake, a lapse in judgment. A lapse in judgment is forgetting an anniversary, Patricia said quietly. And her voice was more devastating than Richard's rage. What you did was calculated cruelty. You condemned this girl to a lifetime of damage because you were too cowardly to face consequences. Mom, please. I said get out. Richard stood, his considerable height making Christopher step back. You're not welcome here. Not tonight. Not until you've made this right. If that's even possible. Christopher looked around the table wildly at his father's fury, his mother's disgust, his sister's horror, and finally at me. I met his gaze with dry eyes now. All my tears spent. I loved you, I said softly. I would have forgiven almost anything if you'd just been honest with me. But you weren't, and now everyone knows what you are. He grabbed his jacket and left without another word. The sound of his car peeling out of the driveway echoed through the house. I sank back into my chair, suddenly exhausted. The folder sat open on the table. My entire medical trauma laid bare for this family I barely knew. I'm sorry, I said to Patricia. I'm sorry for ruining your birthday. You didn't ruin anything, she said, and to my surprise her voice was gentle. My son did that all on his own. She paused, then asked, what will you do now? My lawyer is sending a demand letter tomorrow. I'm also contacting Riverside Prep. Teachers aren't supposed to knowingly transmit diseases to people and then lie about it. There are moral clauses in his contract. Richard nodded approvingly. Good. He should face professional consequences. And if you need legal counsel for a civil suit. I know people. I don't want revenge, I said, which was almost true. I just want him to be held accountable. And I want other women to know what he's capable of so they don't end up like me. Chelsea was still staring at the medical records. You really can't have kids? Probably not. The scarring is too extensive. IVF might work, but the odds aren't good. I laughed bitterly. Ironic, right? He destroyed the one thing he claimed he wanted: a family with me. What he wanted, Patricia said sharply, was control. The family talk was just another way to keep you invested in a future he knew wouldn't happen. She stood, walking around the table to place a hand on my shoulder. I owe you an apology, Vanessa. I judged you unfairly from the beginning. I thought you weren't good enough for my son. I was wrong. He was never good enough for you. The kindness broke something in me. I started crying again, and Patricia pulled me into an embrace that felt maternal in a way I desperately needed. You're going to be okay, she murmured. This feels like the end, but it's just the beginning. You're free of him now. That's worth something. Over the next week, everything unfolded with brutal efficiency. Dion sent the demand letter Monday morning. Christopher's response came through his own lawyer by Tuesday, a settlement offer that included medical expenses, pain, and suffering, and a gag order. I refused. The truth was worth more than his money. I contacted Riverside Prep's headmaster on Wednesday with full documentation. By Friday, Christopher had been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. The teacher's lounge must have been buzzing. All those colleagues he'd mocked me to, now reading reports about what he'd done. The school board meeting was scheduled for the following week. I was invited to provide testimony if I chose. I chose yes. Christopher tried calling 14 times before I blocked his number. His messages progressed from angry to pleading to threatening. Diane saved them all as evidence. Patricia called every few days to check on me. So did Chelsea, surprisingly. The Hendricks women had rallied around me in ways I never expected. Richard even connected me with a specialist in reproductive medicine, someone who might be able to assess whether any fertility options remained. The answer was grim but not completely hopeless. One ovary had less scarring than the other. IVF with aggressive treatment might yield a 10% success rate. Not great odds, but better than 5%. It'll be expensive, the specialist warned. And emotionally brutal. Multiple rounds. Likely. High chance of failure. But possible? Possible, she confirmed. I filed that information away. Maybe someday. Maybe with someone who actually deserved to be a father. Not Christopher. The school board hearing was on a Thursday. I wore the same navy dress I'd worn to Patricia's dinner. Armor that had served me well before. Christopher sat with his lawyer, looking haggard. We didn't make eye contact. I presented my evidence methodically. Medical records. Prescription bottles. Timeline. The principal corroborated that Christopher had indeed made comments about me being frigid at the holiday party. Multiple witnesses confirmed it. Mr. Hendricks, the board chair asked, did you knowingly transmit sexually transmitted infections to Miss Torres without disclosing your status or ensuring she received treatment? Christopher's lawyer leaned in to whisper, but Christopher shook his head. When he spoke, his voice was hollow. Yes, I knew I had been infected. I got treated. I didn't tell her because I was ashamed and scared. I didn't think it through. I didn't understand the consequences. You're a chemistry teacher, one board member said incredulously. You understand how diseases work. You knew this could happen. Christopher had no answer to that. The board deliberated for 40 minutes. When they returned, the verdict was unanimous. Termination. Effective immediately. Moral turpitude clause. Violation of the school's ethics standards. Recommendation that his teaching license be reviewed by the state board. I walked out of that hearing feeling something I hadn't felt in weeks. Vindicated. Christopher caught up with me in the parking lot. Vanessa, wait. I stopped but didn't turn around. I'm sorry, he said. I know that's not enough. But I am. I was selfish and cowardly, And I destroyed something precious. You deserved better. I did. I agreed. I deserved honesty. I deserved respect. I deserved a partner who valued my health as much as his own. I'll regret this for the rest of my life. Good, I said, and finally turned to face him. You should, because I'm going to deal with the consequences of your choices for the rest of mine. Every time I want children, and can't have them easily. Every time I have to explain to a new partner what happened to me. Every time I see a pregnant woman and feel that loss all over again. You took something from me that I can never get back. I'll make it right, he said desperately. The settlement. Whatever you need. You can't make this right with money. There is no amount that gives me back my fertility. I stepped closer. But you know what you can do? You can live with what you did. Really live with it. Let it change you. Become someone who would never do this to another person. That's the only redemption available to you. I left him standing there and drove away. In my rearview mirror, I saw him collapse against his car, head in his hands. I didn't feel satisfaction exactly. Just tired. So tired. 3 months later, I was settling into a new normal. I'd started therapy to process the trauma, both the physical betrayal and the emotional gaslighting. My therapist specialized in medical trauma and reproductive grief. She helped me understand that I was allowed to mourn the future I'd lost, even if that future had been built on lies. I'd also joined a support group for women with PID and infertility. Hearing other stories helped. We were all survivors of something we never should have had to survive. The settlement negotiations had finally concluded. Christopher agreed to pay for all my medical expenses, past, present, and future fertility treatments. The sum was substantial. His father's legal connections had made sure of that. No gag order, though. I refused to be silenced. Patricia invited me to lunch monthly. We'd formed an unlikely friendship, bonded by shared recognition of Christopher's capacity for deception. She'd been blind to his flaws as a mother. I'd been blind to them as a lover. We helped each other see clearly now. He's moved, she told me, over salads at her country club. Took a position at some private school in Colorado. Fresh start? Or so he claims. Good, I said, and meant it. Distance was fine. As long as he couldn't hurt anyone else. The state board suspended his teaching license for 2 years, Patricia continued. They cited the moral turpitude findings. He'll have to disclose this if he wants to teach again. I absorbed that information. 2 years wasn't forever, but it was something. A mark on his record. Evidence that actions had consequences. How are you doing? Patricia asked. Genuine concern in her eyes. Better, I said. Some days are harder than others. But I'm not drowning anymore. And the fertility treatments? Starting IVF next month. The specialist thinks the timing is good. My body has healed from the acute infection. The scarring is stable. It's a long shot, but I want to try. Patricia reached across the table to squeeze my hand. You'll be a wonderful mother someday. However it happens. I hoped she was right. The IVF process was exactly as brutal as promised. Hormone injections that made me feel crazy. Egg retrieval that was painful and invasive. The agonizing wait to see if anything would take. The first round failed. So did the second. By the third round, I'd almost given up hope. But my doctor was optimistic. The embryo quality was good. My uterine lining was responding well. Everything looked promising. I went in for the pregnancy test 2 weeks after transfer, expecting nothing. The nurse called that afternoon. Congratulations, Vanessa. You're pregnant. I sat in my car in the clinic parking lot and sobbed. Relief, joy, terror, gratitude, all of it hitting at once. The pregnancy was high risk because of my medical history. Every appointment felt like holding my breath. But week by week, the little cluster of cells grew into something viable, something real. At 20 weeks, the ultrasound tech smiled and said, "Would you like to know the sex?" "Yes," I whispered. "It's a girl. A daughter." Against all odds, I was having a daughter. I thought about calling Christopher, letting him know that despite his best efforts to destroy me, I'd survived. I'd more than survived. I was creating life. But then I decided he didn't deserve to know. This baby wasn't his story to be part of. She was mine. My miracle. My second chance. I named her Elena, not Eleanor. The name Christopher and I had chosen. This was a new beginning, and she deserved a name with no connection to him. Patricia was at the hospital when Elena was born. So was Chelsea. The Hendricks women showed up for me in ways my own family never had. They held my hand through labor, cried when they first saw her, brought gifts and flowers and endless support. "She's beautiful," Patricia said, cradling her first grandchild, not by blood, but by choice. "You did this, Vanessa. You fought for her." I had fought. Through diagnosis and betrayal and legal battles and medical procedures, through doubt and grief and the slow reconstruction of my shattered life. And now I held the proof that healing was possible, that new beginnings could grow from the worst endings. Christopher sent a card when he somehow found out about Elena's birth. It said simply, "I'm glad you got your happy ending. You deserved it, Kay." I threw it away without responding. He was right, I did deserve a happy ending. But this wasn't an ending at all. It was a beginning. Elena's first year was chaos and joy in equal measure. Late-night feedings and first smiles and the constant wonder of watching a person become themselves. I'd returned to school myself, finishing the degree I'd abandoned when Christopher convinced me I wasn't smart enough for graduate work. Turned out I was plenty smart. I just needed to believe it. My thesis was on medical ethics and patient autonomy, specifically, the legal and moral obligations around STI disclosure. I'd turned my trauma into research, my pain into purpose. The paper was being considered for publication in a medical ethics journal. On Elena's first birthday, I took her to the park near our apartment. She was just starting to walk, stumbling between benches with that drunken toddler confidence. My phone buzzed. A message from David, someone I'd met at the support group. Mid-30s, kind eyes. Worked in nonprofit healthcare. Also dealing with infertility, though his was from cancer treatment in his 20s. We'd talked a few times at meetings. Nothing romantic, just two people who understood what loss felt like. "Hi Vanessa. I know this is random, but would you want to grab coffee sometime? No pressure. Just thought you were really insightful at the last meeting, and I'd like to talk more." I looked at Elena, chasing butterflies with pudgy hands. Looked at the message. Looked at my life imperfect but mine. "Sure," I typed back. "Coffee sounds nice. Maybe nothing would come of it. Maybe something would. Either way, I was ready to find out. The medical records from Dr. Patel sat in a locked drawer at home now. I didn't look at them often. They were evidence of what had happened. But they weren't who I was anymore. I was Elena's mother, a graduate student, a survivor, someone who'd been broken and had chosen to heal, someone who'd been silenced and had chosen to speak. Christopher had tried to destroy me. Instead, he'd freed me. I would never thank him for that. The cost was too high, the damage too real. But I could acknowledge the strange alchemy that turned his cruelty into my strength. The afternoon sun caught Elena's hair as she laughed at absolutely nothing, the way babies do. Pure joy, uncomplicated by the past. I picked her up, kissed her forehead and whispered, "You're my happy ending, baby girl. And my new beginning." She grabbed my nose and giggled. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt genuinely, completely happy. The revenge I'd sought exposing Christopher, destroying his reputation, watching his world crumble had been satisfying in the moment. But this, holding my daughter in the sunshine, building a life that had nothing to do with him, this was better than revenge. This was freedom. The end. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell, so you don't miss any upload from us.